Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's side event on taking stock of the situation on the ground and what's next in Myanmar. This event is sponsored by the International Commission of Jurists, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Forum Asia, IBARI, and the CCPR Center. My name is Ian Siderman. I'm the Legal and Policy Director at International Commission of Jurists. Before beginning the event, I want to inform you that it's not permitted to take photos or videos. There is one exception. A representative of the ICJ has been authorized to video the event, and the video will be live streamed on the ICJ's YouTube page. In February 2021, Myanmar's military launched a coup d'etat, derailing the fledgling progress that had been made in democracy and rule of law in the country, and sending it into a disastrous spiral towards a human rights and humanitarian catastrophe. At this side event, we will hear from a diverse range of expert and civil society panelists who will provide an assessment of the most recent developments and prospects for the immediate future. The Special Rapporteur on Myanmar has delivered a jarring report to the Human Rights Council at this session, providing a detailed overview of the intensified armed conflict, which has seen gains by armed groups in the country and has been accompanied by widespread and systematic human rights and humanitarian law violations committed with impunity. These have been facilitated by arms transfers from abroad. We should note that the ruling junta is not in control of significant parts of Myanmar. Legal systems administered by the NUG and ethnic armed groups have been operating in regions controlled by them. The international community's response to the situation, while marked by sanctions and diplomatic efforts to restore peace and democracy, has unfortunately struggled to keep pace with the evolving situation on the ground. The recent developments underscore the urgent need for a coordinated and effective international strategy to address the multifaceted crisis in Myanmar, one that prioritizes the immediate cessation of human rights violations and abuses and the protection of civilians. Well, I will leave it for our distinguished panelists to provide their insights into the situation on the rapidly evolving situation, and perhaps to provide concrete suggestions on steps that can be taken to address the accountability gap that prevails in Myanmar. I will briefly introduce the panelists, and then we'll take it from there. So first on my left is Ms. Kin Omar, who's the chairperson of Progressive Voice, which is a participatory rights-based policy research and advocacy organization that works with grassroots and community-based organizations in Myanmar. To my far left is Ms. Zar Lee Ai, who is a senior human rights lawyer and a legal advisor for the International Commission of Jurists. To my right is Ms. Monsi Ferrer, who's deputy director of Amnesty International's East and Southeast Asia office. And two spots over, Mr. Tom Andrews, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on Myanmar. So I will start with Omar. Could you please maybe give us a general overview of the current situation in Myanmar as you see it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues, distinguished guests. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. So we passed 3 years already since 2021, as the chair already gave an overview in the introduction. The country, our country, Myanmar, the people's resistance, the resilience are so strong, remain to be very strong. And I want to share with you a bit of it, because whenever we talk about Myanmar, it sounds like there is no hope. But I want to bring you the side of the hope that we're seeing on the ground, which is, of course, challenging for those from far away to see that as we see it on the ground. So the democratic resistance movement is with the collective vision of establishing a new Myanmar in a federal democratic governance structure. And there are founding philosophies or founding the concept of the Federal Democratic Union is already laid foundation in what we call as the Federal Democratic Charter, which is actually established over the last 3 years with the intersectional of the intergenerational democracy activists, women, youth, LGBTIQ, ethnic and religious minority communities all together. It's quite comprehensive to actually build this foundation. It's also the essence of it is to really uphold the humanity, dignity, also inclusivity, democracy, and justice. And I emphasize inclusivity because Myanmar previous successive military regimes have been very, very like divide and rule in the country among the communities, populations, and this exclusivity is one of the core root cause of our country getting into this level of deep crisis. Just overview on the ground at this point, when it comes to the territorial control, because I know like, especially in the UN, you look into the who control who have the state sovereignty control, yeah? Over 60%, 60% of the territorial control are under the National Unity Government and their allies, ethnic revolutionary organizations or the administrations. And this is quite significant as we will talk about the future of Myanmar and also to address the current humanitarian crisis, because you need to have access to the people who are most vulnerable, who need the humanitarian aid. But those 2.7 million internally displaced people who need the direst humanitarian aid are actually in the areas where the military is bombing, but also it is in the areas of this National Unity Government and their allies administration who have the access. I want to also share with you that there are some foundations, very, very concrete foundations are already been laid. There are federal states within this new Federal Democratic Union has been already been built. I want to give you just very, very one concrete example of a small state bordering with Thailand called Karani, or some know as Gaya. So the Karani state, for example, already now they have a roadmap that they are not only like that they develop, but they are actually implementing. What do I mean by implementing is actually on the ground right now, they have already setting up the institutions. Yeah, they have a interim executive council, which is the government. They have an interim parliament also in place, functioning, and also led by including the young women. And they are developing the interim constitution as well as policies, including trade policy. And these are the real people's efforts on the ground that we would like for you to really, really look closely and see how you can be a part of this new Myanmar building as we will move on from here on. And for example, just to give you another one, as the Karani is building the administrative, they are also building judiciary as well as also security. They have like 600 police who are already being trained to do the community-based security, yeah? And they are aiming to get to another 400 in coming months, up to 1,000 to have this community security. They call the community, democratic community-based police, yeah? So you can see this is just to give you one example, but there are other places where such horizontal people's movements building these institutions and infrastructures and the service provisions. So let me move you to the more interim federal level. The National Unity Government is the interim government of the Myanmar People's Democratic Resistance Movement. Together with the ethnic alliances, they are working together. And the NUG has also this local administrations more in the very central area of Myanmar in the upper north, where they also have this judiciary, as well as also the security and service provision administrations are being set up. Myanmar has 330 townships. 173 out of 330 are under the National Unity Government administration. So that's huge. We're not even counting the ethnic areas where the ethnic local governance has been set up for past decades. So that's one thing that I want to just bring to you. Well, I won't get into the detail, but what I want to share here with you is there are some misconceptions around Myanmar current narrative from some parts of the international community. What they are saying is that, oh, Myanmar is going to be balkanized. Oh, Myanmar is being split into pieces, fragmented. Well, Myanmar is very diverse. We are not denying that. But we never had a chance for the people to come together, to unite among themselves, to build this nation at their will, with their efforts, to actually get rid of this institutionalized systemic persecutions, discrimination, and all of that. This is where the people are at the moment, with a very little support from the outside world. That's what they are doing. The immense suffering that people are getting is the military's unprecedented violence. So the airstrikes are the most lethal weapon that military is heavily relying on. And you can imagine why, because they don't have the control over the country. They just cannot move on the land. So they are heavily relying from the airstrikes. But the latest wave is they try to enact this the conscription law. Is a forced conscription of the young people, both men and women between age 18 to 35 into the army. And you can imagine even from that one thing, how desperate this Myanmar military junta at this point. For the last 3 years, they could not recruit from anywhere in the country because nobody, including their most stronghold recruitment area, are all against them. And that's where Myanmar military is. We are saying confidently that this 70 years old most corrupt criminal gang of the world, who are oppressing their people, bombing the children and raping the women, are on the verge of about to collapse. The question now to all of you as the international community is, are you ready to give the hand, practical support to the people of Myanmar to get to the stage of removing this military, come to be under the civilian control as we move into the new Myanmar Federal Democratic Union, where we can ensure and guarantee all the peoples, including our brothers and sisters, Rohingya people, 1 million being refugees for the last 6 years on Bangladesh side. We need Myanmar people to be able to come back home, whether they are on China border, Bangladesh border, India border, or abroad elsewhere in Singapore and Japan. We need them to be able to come back home. The only way is if we can bring the Myanmar military under the international law, hold them accountable, and bring this new Myanmar in the federal democratic system, we will be able to have a chance to move forward. For that, we need your help to have the aviation fuel cut, unregulated and illicit arms sales and transfer cut, but also accountability. And for that, we would like for the council to actually seek and request the High Commissioner to look into all possible criminal prosecutorial mechanisms to ensure these perpetrators, the international criminals of this Myanmar military, are held account by international law. With that, I end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omar. And I think despite everything, you've left some positive notes for us to take into account about an approach toward inclusivity amongst diversity. And it's a really critical message to take in mind. I turn now to Zar Lee. And can you tell us, Zar Lee, the impact of the situation on the justice system in the country and on lawyers? What are developments around that you have been observing recently?
Thank you, Ian. First of all, I would like to, mention that Makeoma already covered about what is, happening, and then the overview of the overview of Myanmar situation. So as myself, so I'm also a lawyer, so that's why I would like to talking more about on the judicial accountability and also the impact of the lawyers and also political prisoner, which is currently inside in Myanmar. So since in the military coup, so maybe you might all aware that in Myanmar a lot of people they have been arrested. But if you count that a number of political detainees are young, youth, women, and even children. So as I base in Yangon, so myself and my team, so we could provide more than 2,000, nearly 3,000 of 2,500 in exact number is 2,500 political detainees we provided. So and then as military coup is not our very first time. This is not our very first time. But what I got the impression is that all of our youth people and also who are being detained, so they are not hopeless. They are upholding their hope, and also they are seeking for the brighter future. So, and then another thing is like, not only to the political detainees, but also who are being recently released, who have been through a lot of torture, ill treatment in the interrogations. So even though they are recently released, they are also really would like to be part of the international judicial accountability as well. So that is why this is what I got really uphold my optimistic, because I'm also agreed that what Makeoma said. So yes, of course, so Myanmar is really diverse, honestly, because we have been we use over 100 language, and then we also use we also have more than 50 ethnic tribes or something. I'm also part of it. I'm also coming from the minority ethnic group. I use 4 different languages to communicate with my family member and also my community. So I totally understand the different diverse practice that we also practice in the community. So in the same time, in this political diverse, so I also would like to echo about the justice system is also diverse, because in Myanmar we do have our more than decades, and even since 1988, and even even though in the past of in the NLD government, in the civilian government, judiciary never been changed. So that is why with this revolution, I also would like to see the judiciary accountability and also in the same time judicial reformation as well, because judiciary is the main mandate is should be serve justice, but the justice is in an ethnic community and also other part of the region, they don't understand, they don't even assess the justice because of they've been through, and then they've been in a in a political impact or something like that. So that is why in these political changes, even though in the international community, so if you would like to help, and then we are to help to the political changes, and then in the same time I also would like to see the judiciary changes as well. So I would like to end in here, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Zarli, and for reminding us that the critical role of the judiciary and the legal profession in restoring or building the rule of law in the country, which is also critical for human rights protection. So, Mansi, I wanted to ask you, Amnesty International recently published a report on the role of third parties in supplying the junta with aviation fuel weapons. Can you tell us a bit more about this work and about the conclusions regarding the responsibility of various actors that are helping to fuel the conflict?
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on the panel today. Since the 2021 coup, we all know that the Myanmar military has increasingly relied on its air power to conduct airstrikes. However, the situation on the ground, as my co-panelists have noted, has worsened that. in terms of the Myanmar military, especially the Air Force, increasingly relying on air power. Amnesty International, because of that, has been looking at one issue around airstrikes in the last 2.5 years, which is without aviation fuel, jets cannot drop bombs. What I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes is a short report that we published last month that looked at the impact of sanctions imposed by countries in this room, the US, the UK, the EU, Switzerland, and how that has changed the supply chain of aviation fuel into Myanmar. I will be referring to supply chain throughout the next few minutes. Supply chain just simply means how, in this case, aviation fuel moves from point A to point Z, point A being wherever it is refined, the supplier of the fuel, and point Z in this case being the use by the Air Force in committing airstrikes that in many cases constitute war crimes. But in order to really understand how things have changed since the sanctions that were imposed, I'll start a little bit earlier in the timeline. So in November 2022, Amnesty International, with the close collaboration of Justice for Myanmar, published this report, Deadly Cargo. What the report did at the time was identify a supply chain that basically showed that the majority, if not all, of the aviation fuel that the Myanmar military uses comes in through vessel. We were able to identify companies, international and regional companies that were supplying that fuel, for example, PetroChina, Thai Oil, Exxon, etc. Then we were able to track how once the fuel arrives, and it arrived always at the same location, a terminal in Tirawa port next to Yangon, what would happen after arrival. So basically what it showed is that the fuel would then be distributed across the country, and it would be stored in both civilian commercial tanks or military air bases. And after that, fuel would be used either for commercial airlines or for airstrikes, many of which amount to war crimes. The key conclusion of that report was that no matter the purposes of the aviation fuel at the time it arrives to Myanmar, in other words, even if someone were to tell you, well, I'm selling aviation fuel for the purpose of commercial reasons, the moment it arrived in that port terminal, the Myanmar military had control over it. And so it either immediately diverted the fuel or it misappropriated down the line, which is why Amnesty was able to join the calls of many CSOs in this room to say we must ban aviation fuel as a whole. That was November 2022. And then in January to March, the EU, the US, the UK, Switzerland passed sanctions. These sanctions are referred to as targeted sanctions. They're sanctions that were specifically targeting companies, but the companies that were targeted were, for the most part, except one, Myanmar companies. And the problem was that at the time of the sanctions, so that was several months after some of these allegations came out, the companies already changed name. And in many cases, the companies, or rather the people behind the companies, so the people in Myanmar linked to the Myanmar military, had already shifted production, or rather distribution, to a different company within a bigger group of companies. In other words, the sanctions were targeting the wrong companies. However, the positive aspect of these sanctions is that, without a doubt, it was a clear message to the international fuel world. This is a dangerous trade. Do not sell aviation fuel directly to Myanmar. So what we found in 2023, and that's the report that we just published, we look at fuel from January to December, we find the following. We found that there was a lull, which means a reduction to zero of imports of aviation fuel from January to March. Why? Our theory is that that's when the Myanmar military is regrouping, sanctions are being imposed, they don't know how they're going to be able to introduce aviation fuel back into the market. And so you see no imports of aviation fuel by vessel. Then, however, unfortunately, in April and until August, you have a spike in increase. We identify 6 separate shipments, which as compared to 2021, 2022 is an increase year to year of shipments. Then the US passes a sanction maybe not, but a framework in August that basically says we're not sanctioning any one individual company, but if you participate in the supply chain of aviation fuel, you may be at risk of sanctions. We have a second lull, September to November or so, of no shipments, and then we have one more shipment in December. Our theory is that this is clearly, generally what happened was the Myanmar military responding to sanctions, and what I'm about to say is their way of evading sanctions. So, what are the changes? I just did this quickly today, so just to try to simplify a bit of a complicated concept, but I'll stay next to the microphone. Okay, so before the sanctions, we would have a very simple first part of the supply chain. For example, Exxon PetroChina says, I'm going to sell a shipment of aviation fuel to a company that's based in Myanmar. So you have step one, original fuel supplier going, forget the middle step, going directly to the Myanmar purchaser. For an external party like us, it's quite relatively easy to track. You look at a vessel, you go from point A, point B, and then you can investigate more steps, but it's pretty simple. Then sanctions come up and say Exxon, just as an example, says, you know what, this is too risky. I'm not selling directly to Myanmar. So the Myanmar military says, what are we going to do next? So what they do next is they add the second step. It's in this diagram, it's shown as one step, but actually it can be up to 5, 6 additional steps. Point being that the original supplier, again, say Exxon or PetroChina, sells not to a Myanmar purchaser, but to a fuel trader. The fuel trader could be based anywhere in the world. Let's say they're based in Japan. And then Japan sells, that trader sells to another one that's based in Dubai, that then sells to et cetera, until it eventually arrives to Myanmar. So in the 7 shipments that we identified in 2023, we found 3 common elements. Let me scroll down. First one is that all the shipments of these that are now complicated and convoluted and very hard to track if you're an external party, they all came through, except one, through the same vessel, Hutong 78. That's the name of the vessel. It's a vessel that is China flagged, China owned. Second common factor is that right before this shipment, the Hutong 78 carrying jet fuel arrives in Myanmar, in all cases, the last stop it made before it arrived was this it was this storage unit in Vietnam. The storage unit is in Khai Met, which is a location terminal, and it's managed by a company called Hai Lin, very, very small company. No one's heard of it, outside of that context. Why is this relevant? It's relevant because this company, well, in addition to perhaps being completely immune to any sanctions that have already been passed or will be passed, this company plays a key role in obscuring the origin of the good, right? Because it's a storage unit. So Highland does not produce the fuel. It does sell it directly to Myanmar, but all it does is it brings fuel into the storage unit and it holds the storage of the fuel until it's ready to sell it to Myanmar. This is also important, as I just said, because for us external parties, it's very hard to trace. When something arrives at a storage unit, you don't know what tank it goes into. It could stay there for a week or 2 weeks. Externally, it's impossible to know unless you have an insider who's telling you what happened. The third common factor, and I'm almost done. No, actually, don't scroll. I forgot to put a photo of this. The third factor is that they all came in through the same port terminal in Myanmar. Why is that significant? Because the companies that were sanctioned by the various countries were companies that were operating that port. They didn't need to find a different port. They just changed the name of the companies. All the fuel still continues to come in through the same port location in Tilawa, Yangon. So with that, I finish. Amnesty International is not an expert on sanctions. This is not an area. This is for others to decide, including people in this room. I think the point here being that we come back to the same call that CSOs in this room have made, and we make again. This piecemeal approach does not work. You need a full ban, a full suspension. In our case, we're calling a suspension of aviation fuel, because if not, you get this. True, a couple months of a lull of exports, you redesign a supply chain and you're back. And in this case, as I think I already said, we saw in 2023 an increase in aviation fuel entering the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moxie. And you really set out, I think, kind of elaborate network of different points of responsibility for what ultimately turns into human rights violations, but also very graphically displayed why going after just bits of the network won't work without a more comprehensive approach. Thank you for that. Next, I will turn to Tom Andrews, the Special Rapporteur, and I'd like to ask you, Special Rapporteur, you have yourself documented and heard from the other panelists so far some of the atrocities going on in Myanmar and how the situation is evolving. Can you give your overall assessment and the main recommendations that you have for the international community and especially the Human Rights Council? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Am I on? Can people hear me? No.
Oh, just
You can't
push the red button.
push it again. Okay. Thank you. It's an honor to be with this very august group of panelists who are very committed to human rights, but more than that, are very effective in their advocacy for human rights and the people of Myanmar. So it really is an honor. I have laid out in my recent report my latest findings as the UN Special Rapporteur on the crisis in Myanmar, the human rights crisis in Myanmar. Let me just say, to build on what you've heard from my fellow panelists, the hope that Omar has referred to is real, and it comes from the people of Myanmar. And it provides the international community with an extraordinary opportunity to take action that will truly make a difference, perhaps the difference that could end the nightmare with the people of Myanmar that they've been living with now since the coup, and build the foundation for a future based upon human rights, justice, accountability, and the enfranchisement of all people. We are at a critical moment, but we need to seize that moment with the people of Myanmar with the kind of international action that we have not demonstrated to this point. I want to outline a few of those basic fundamental steps that we need to be taking. Number one, we need to be denying the junta the money, the weapons, and the legitimacy that it requires to sustain itself. And we need to do this through targeted, focused, strategic actions, including sanctions, both on the financial side and the weapons side, that add up together into a coherent whole. Now, what we've all seen over the past few years is that various countries will at various times announce various types of sanctions. They often are in reaction to an atrocity that generated headlines or an anniversary. That is not a strategy. And these actions are very disparate. They're not connected. There's no coordination. There's no targeting. What the international community needs and what the people of Myanmar deserve is to have those actions add up. Let's identify those points in which the junta is most vulnerable, and we know what they are. Let's target actions, sanctions, focusing on those points. And then let's work together as an international community to coordinate the application and the enforcement of those sanctions to make them as effective as they can and need to be. So that's the first thing. That applies to money, cutting the flow of money from the junta and the flow of weapons. And we know that these steps can have an impact. Singapore, as in my last report last year, was identified as the third largest source of weapons materials to the junta after Russia and after China. To their credit, Singapore launched an investigation shortly after that report. They had no knowledge of this. They were certainly not involved in any of this. And I was very happy to report day before yesterday before the council, there has been an 83% reduction in weapons materials from sources in Singapore to Myanmar. And I can tell you that has dropped even further in the past few months. So significant progress can be made, but the political will needs to be there to do so. The third area that I think is extremely important is, as we've heard from the panel, is the need for humanitarian aid, where the humanitarian aid needs to go. And that's in the conflict areas. And we've heard a proposal I was in Thailand just two weeks ago. We've heard a proposal for a humanitarian aid corridor going into Myanmar. Sounds good. Humanitarian aid corridor. The problem with this is twofold. That humanitarian corridor would put humanitarian aid into the hands of the junta. And it's the junta that is driving the need for humanitarian aid. Before this coup, there was 1 million people were in need of humanitarian aid. 1 million people before the coup 3 years ago. Now it's 18.6 precisely because of the junta. So putting humanitarian aid into the hands of the very source of the need for humanitarian aid makes very little sense to me. And we know almost certainly that that aid would become weaponized. It would not be going to where it needs to go, precisely into the conflict areas. And what is so clear to me in my travels is that there are CSOs, networks, infrastructure in place right now to get that humanitarian aid directly to the people who need it, but they can't get it to them because they don't have the resources. They are dramatically under-resourced, and we have to address that. The other area I'd like to mention is accountability. There is great frustration among many who I speak with about the impunity and how the lack of commitment, political will to hold those who are responsible for these atrocities fully accountable. And we know that evidence is being gathered, various steps are being taken. That's all to the good. But it seems to me that we need to be working harder at finding a full range of options to hold these people accountable. And one option that I mentioned, the NUG had a few years ago made a declaration to the International Criminal Court that it would be subject to the authority of the court in the jurisdiction of the court in examining crimes committed since 2002. So that was established by the NUG a few years ago. It is possible for member states of the ICC to file under Article 14 of the Rome Statute a request of the prosecutor to seize that opportunity and begin an investigation of those crimes. So these are options that exist for accountability. There are clear options for humanitarian aid. There's clear options to deny the junta the weapons and the money that it needs to continue these atrocities. What we have to do is seize them. And it's because of the incredible, inspiring work that's being done on the ground, despite all the dangers and all the hardships from people inside of Myanmar. They need and they deserve our support much, much, much more than they've been getting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Special Rapporteur. I very much took note of your stress of the need for greater political will, especially to address money, weapons transfers, and the need for a unified strategy that's not just piecemeal and reactive to events. The fact that for humanitarian aid to be effective, we need to strengthen the capacity of CSOs to receive and help deliver the aid. And then finally, your last point on increasing capacities for accountability and exploring options such as invoking the jurisdiction of the ICC. So with that, I think we have some time for some comments and questions from the floor. I'd like to first turn it over to Razia Sultana, a lawyer from Myanmar, who wanted to make a comment. Please, Razia.
I don't think it's on. I don't, because it's the lights off.
There you go.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm based in Bangladesh, but I'm born in Myanmar, and I'm a Rohingya. And my community greatly appreciate the immense efforts of the Bangladesh government and local communities in hosting almost 1 million Rohingya in their homeland. At the moment, the safe and sustainable return to homeland in Myanmar is totally impossible for Rohingya. but we must prepare for the eventual return and reintegration of the Rohingya to our Myanmar community. We call for Bangladesh support to ensure our current and future generation have all necessary tools for meaningful reintegration. This includes education with Myanmar curriculum. So our children and youth can become contributing member of Myanmar society and build their own future in their own native land, Rakhine. Inside Myanmar, our Rohingya community is targeted, killed, and displaced by the military junta in testifying atrocity and cannot seek refuge across the border. And you know, the last 18 March, there were air strike where the 23 and 30. It is the official number. And one thing is clear: there were no armed force in that village. So it is a purposely they're killing Rohingya. And this junta is responsible for the Rohingya genocide. Now they are again doing the massacre. So it should need aviation sanction. And at last I can say to the ace of the burden of Bangladesh, we call for efforts from all parties to ensure protection of the Rohingya people in Rakhine State with the support of the United League of Arakan, who control most territory in Rakhine State. We urge all donors to ensure aid reach the hand of those dyers in need through cross-border channel in collaboration with the Bangladesh Red Cross. These are immediate action we need. We urge all finally I can say Rohingya community is not merely victim of survivor of genocide, but they must be officially recognized as ethnic nationality, native and belong in Rakhine State, and as Myanmar citizen equal among other ethnic minorities. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, please turn your. Thank you, and I think that we have to really much keep in mind the really atrocious plight of Rohingya people, crimes against humanity, genocidal acts that have occurred and that are continuing to, and as we discussed the broader situation in Myanmar, that cannot be forgotten. Can I see if there are any calls from the floor to ask questions of the panelists or provide a comment? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Yes, Luxembourg, please.
Thank you very much indeed. So, our thanks to panelists, especially from the civil society of Myanmar, the message of the team have shared. I think it's very important that the members of this council here, but also all other member states, and indeed also all states that make up the Security Council in New York, hear your messages. In many other situations by now, well, we know that we have the plan and the initiatives for the region, and we very much hope that they will also take on board the messages that come from the country, both from you who are inside the country, but also from who are outside the country, and that we can rally about. We have to be grateful to have a very strong special rapporteur who tells us in absolutely no uncertain terms what is expected of us. We get our act together when it comes to sanctions, when it comes to marginalizing politically, but also economically and militarily the illegal military junta. It's just if we keep bumping into the same lack of political will, distraction, lack of sufficient attention. So I think that the more we hear these messages, and the more we manage to pass them on, the better. So I really just want to thank you for that. We did have a chance to look into most of the NGO representatives and the special officials. So I don't have direct question now, but rest assured that we'll keep carrying that message forward to our as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Loitong Bam from Human Rights Alert, Manipur in India. I would like to again thank the Special Rapporteur for his last year's recommendation to give unfettered access to UNHCR to all parts of India, including Manipur and Mizoram. Unfortunately, of course, that recommendation to the government of India remained unimplemented. And we are very concerned that the government of Manipur have recently come out with a declaration that they are going to push back about 70 odd asylum seekers or Myanmar nationals from the territory of India. And this requires, again, I think some concerted action from the Special Rapporteur's office as well as, I think, the international community that India, being the immediate neighbor, the approach towards the Myanmar refugees seeking asylum has been not very positive. The recent announcement by the Union Home Ministry to fence the entire Myanmar-India border, as well as to do away with the free trade regime. Till now, 16 kilometers on either side, people were able to move around, but this has been officially dropped, even though on the ground it is not fully implemented. I would like to draw the attention that in these areas, in Chin State, in Segang Division, where the conflict is very hot, these kind of restrictions is going to create more havoc and inhuman consequences. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll give a. I'll take two more comments and then turn it to the panel, or three. Okay. Please.
Okay. Okay. My name is Ponpen. I'm coming from Thailand, and I'm sorry that I'm late today, but I want just to inform you about attempts from the parliamentarians that had set up a committee dealing with this emergency situation of influx of the Myanmar population coming after the compulsory recruitment of the military. We have set up the committee, and I'm one of them, one of the subcommittee members. We have had some difficulty convincing National Security Office and also Ministry of Interior, including the Prime Minister Office, to open up policy in, at first, not arresting on the ground of immigration law. It's not successful yet. Second, on the involvement of NGO, INGO, and local community in the humanitarian corridors is not opening up yet. So the aspect of here at the UN, Thailand is pledged to be a member of Human Rights Councils. And I would urge the friends here also asking Thailand to open up humanitarian sincerity to the Myanmar population first before supporting them to become the Human Rights Committee in the councils. Thailand have rooms for friends from Myanmar, as always, but we need the openness of the government. And the government in Thailand is very convinced if people here at the UN also requesting that precondition before being a member of the Human Rights Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, the delegate from China.
I would like to emphasize 2 points. The first one, I think one panel is just the sanction by understand clear. So I would like to emphasize that we have a more appropriate platform to talk about the diversion, the risk of diversion of arms. I mean the arms trade treaty, and actually we have such discussion in this platform, and it's also based in Geneva. So I think it's the right place to talk about this issue. Second point I would like to emphasize is that I think one panelist just mentioned the name of my country and companies of my maybe belongs to China, and I would like to have half a minute to explain our policy on arms trade exports, so that such information will not mislead the audience. So China is always take the serious and responsible attitude on the policy of arms export, and we regulate all arms exports in a strict and effective manner based on our domestic laws and international obligations. And we will request the arms recipient country to provide end user certification and to promise without our permission will not re-export to the third party of the arms which imported from China. So that's our policy. We would like to make it clear. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more, Sam Zariki.
Thank you, and thank you to the organizers of this panel, and wonderful to see also colleagues from civil society in Myanmar. Following up on the statement from the delegate and question from members of the panel, clearly the most influential external actors in Myanmar are China and ASEAN members. The Special Rapporteur already mentioned some of the changes made by Singapore, which potentially could be effective. I'm very happy to hear the Chinese government clarify their position, but it would be really good to hear the level of engagement and support that the Special Rapporteur and colleagues from Myanmar civil society have in terms of engaging with ASEAN members and with China, and what kind of support are you getting, especially I think from China, which is probably the most powerful single actor, external actor in Myanmar in terms of ensuring compliance with the junta's human rights obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we could just have a quick round of responses from panelists. Okay, we'll start with the Special Rapporteur.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me say first of all that we have we're very eager to engage with China. I'm very happy to see that China is represented here and to hear and your comments today. And we'll continue to reach out to seek an opportunity to meet with China, in fact, even to visit China. So this is a very important step. Last year, when I made my comments and I released the report, the $1 billion death trade, identifying China as the second largest source of weapons to the military junta of Myanmar, China accused me of, in China's words, vilifying normal arms trade. And what I want to make clear is that what I am vilifying is war crimes and crimes against humanity. And the knowledge that sophisticated weapons of war are being used against innocent civilians. There's been a 5-time increase in the bombing of villages using sophisticated weapons of war. And what I'm appealing to, both within but also outside of formal mechanisms that exist with the United Nations and beyond the United Nations, is for member states to stop engaging with and empowering and weaponizing the military junta with the full knowledge that these weapons are being used to commit probable war crimes and crimes against humanity. I think what is at stake here is a lack of political will to have the kind of coordinated action that we all need to, as an international community, to take in order to stop these weapons. And while some countries will continue to send weapons into Myanmar, I fully recognize that. Some countries who are supplying these weapons, I'm not going to give them away. They're going to sell the weapons to Myanmar. So it's for precisely that reason that cutting off access to resources, to money for the junta will have a direct impact on mitigating their capacity to import weapons of war that are being used against innocent civilians. In terms of those who are running over the border, literally running for their lives, this is a growing phenomenon. From India, certainly those running for the forced recruitment campaign And those numbers are only going to increase as the living hell continues to increase and ferment inside of Myanmar. I want to make it very clear that the principle of non-refoulement must be adhered to and respected by member states. That these people are not running into your country because they want to, they're running because they need to. And it is our responsibility to accept them, protect them, and support them as an international community.
Thank you. I think we just have literally 1 minute left, so I can get one more response. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question also. If I can kind of like try to combine my points. Our engagement with the ASEAN, from the civil society perspective, we try our best, but we still feel that we are still left out. For example, the 5-point consensus plan, now the ASEAN already changed to call it as a peace plan for Myanmar. None of our Myanmar people, including the political stakeholders, were never consulted. We were never asked for our consent for this so-called peace plan. So you can imagine any external imposed peace plan. We had an experience 10 years, in the past 10 years, and look at where we are as we are witnessing. So we can't allow the same mistake come back again. So that's one thing that we are also now at this point. After this session at the council, we will be trying to engage with the ASEAN Special Envoy Office to find out what exactly that they are doing, as they claim that they made the decision to do the comprehensive review of the 5-point consensus implementation plan. None of us has ever seen anything of it. So we need to ask them what is their pledge, how they are holding to their pledge, because especially we are concerned in the council right now, the resolution actually look into continue to be supporting the ASEAN, but there is nothing really coming to our peoples on the ground. So it's very serious. But coming to our Thai sister, it's true, Thai MPs, progressive MPs are really looking to support the Myanmar people coming and fleeing into Thailand. What we would like is, in addition to the principle of non-refoulement, we would like to see Thailand and other neighboring countries to actually give the legal protection, at least for temporary, like the special rapporteur said, our people are not fleeing because they want to be, without the document in other countries. So I think it's just something we will need for your support as well. And I think in terms of with China, to be very honest, since the representative of China mission is here, we would like to really have the door open from China to the Myanmar civil society, to the young generation who are going to be the leader of our country in next 2-3 years, even in next, who knows, in next six months and a year, if this military falls, they are the one going to be leading our country. So we would like for the China leadership to look at the Myanmar solution with the people center rather than military center approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and to all the panelists for this extremely rich discussion, and also to all people who have attended and joined us. And I wish you all good afternoon.